Ooh, as for the all-important internet primary, well, last night's debate did have a winner. I think you just saw her there. One of the reasons why from the post-debate, perhaps, Marianne Williamson was apparently a huge hit on the web, and there are numbers that back that up, too. Look at the Google Trends data. She was the most searched candidate during the debate in 49 states. Only Montana was a holdout, apparently more interested in its own governor, Steve Bullock. Williamson has a style of her own, and evidently it is working in some ways. Her campaign says today was the biggest day for donations since they launched, and that could be thanks in part to Team Trump, which is now propping up Williamson's performance, according to a report in the New York Times today, and a number of standout moments like this from last night.
This is part of the dark underbelly of American society. The racism, the bigotry, and the entire conversation that we're having here tonight. If you think any of this wonkiness is going to deal with this dark psychic force of the collectivized hatred that this president is bringing up in this country, then I'm afraid that the Democrats are going to see some very dark days.
Elise, I know you've been curious about Marianne Williamson. Let me put it this way, though. This is a candidate with an unusual background for the presidency. There are, we say, 24 candidates out there. You can find polls. I've seen some this week where she is polling better than a U.S. senator, members of that, people with very distinguished political resumes. She's not a front runner by any means, but what's your reaction to what we saw last night?
Last night, Marianne Williamson spoke to, I think, the hunger that people in this country have for just wanting to see some compassion and empathy. And she was speaking about love, and I think that was refreshing for a moment of just spiritual crisis in the country. But I feel like her answer to the young student journalist also embodies this political moment. She's saying, oh, I have a cat, and leaning into the moment, but he died. And so it's kind of just this moment of political darkness that, you know, politicians can try to go back to normal, but it's just never going to be normal.
Or is that the candidate who's not afraid to give you the hard truths?
Well, right, when she was talking about the Flint water crisis, no, when she talked about the, no, I'm not talking about the cat, okay? I'm sorry about that.
You're on the Flint water crisis, I'm talking about the cat. I'm sorry
about the cat.
That was my one thought.
But her answer about the Flint water crisis was a great answer. I mean, and she said, you know, this would not have happened in Grosse Pointe, you know, the ritziest suburb of Detroit. And it's an outrage that people are still drinking bottled water, and that people responded to that. It was truth.
As the dark psychic forces correspondent at the table, I think there is something about sort of her unorthodox authenticity that I think did sort of resonate with a few people yesterday. You're right. She did speak very powerfully about that. She spoke about racism. She spoke about there is a sense of compassion that she had some feeling there. She wasn't programmed at all, clearly, by any sort of consultant. But I also think that she is someone who, you know, checkered resume and some checkered beliefs, too. I mean, she's voice of skepticism about vaccines and so on. And I think with a little further exploration dive into who she is and her record and resume, some of this internet glow may fade.
Benefits from the lack of scrutiny that a frontrunner might get, perhaps. But what about some of these other candidates? We're talking about Marianne Williamson. Jen, did anybody else on that stage last night? John Delaney got a lot of airtime. Anybody else?
The funny thing is, John Delaney actually didn't get a lot of airtime, but we all seem to think that he did. I guess because he was a sparring partner with Elizabeth Warren. I think my friend Steve Bullock had a good night. You know, this was his first night on the debate stage.
Montana agreed, as we just showed.
Montana agreed. They were super interested in their governor. You know, this is somebody who's gotten a lot of impressive things done in with a very Republican state. And I think, you know, in terms of what everybody's trying to achieve on that stage, I think some folks want to set themselves up as a good alternative to Biden. You know, if Biden doesn't, you know, if Biden has another bad night.
And I guess, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I'm not sure Bernie Sanders had a great night. Just because of the way things have been trending. He's been trending a bit down as Warren has trended a bit up. I don't think he did anything to sort of turn around those
and the thing that I think she was trying to do that was interesting, because the first debate, she's the best in the world at connecting people's lives and policy, right? She's just the best at that. And she didn't really do that so much this time. It was like she was trying to get the moral high ground, which I felt was a call to Bernie supporters, right? To show, like, I'm not just the person with the plan. Like, you can trust me to be as deeply committed to all of this as Bernie. It was not as welcoming, I thought, to your average voter, but I felt like she was going for the Sanders supporters.
I wonder, watching them last night, too, there's all these theories about how, especially Sanders is going to play this. I think there's a lot of people who have the view that he is just in it till the convention, no matter what. There's another view out there, though, that if Warren finishes above him, say, in Iowa, and then again in New Hampshire, where they're both sort of next-door neighbors, and clearly Warren has sort of distanced herself at that point, that he drops out and endorses her.
It's possible. I think it was very interesting, because you're right, that belief is held by many in Democratic quarters, that Bernie Sanders is going to stay with this, that he's for himself more than party, perhaps. But I think what we saw last night is, with the two of them on the stage together, there was at least some belief that they would duke it out, that they'd want to fight for that title of, like, the progressive champion, the most liberal on the stage. And instead, they almost seemed to join forces and sort of fought off the moderates who flanked them on the stage. There was very little criticism between the two. So that is perhaps a signal that they would be aligned down the road in a scenario outlined like you just did.
I'd argue, though, that Elizabeth Warren has nothing to gain by attacking Bernie Sanders when she is literally peeling off his voters at a rate that he has to be hugely alarmed by right now. And you look at going into the future, Bernie Sanders really didn't have the kind of moments that he had back in the primary debates in 2016 when he was up against really just Hillary Clinton. You had a Bernie Sanders whose only moment last night where he really sparked was when, in his closing statement, he said Donald Trump is a racist, he's a misogynist, he's a homophobe. And that was the old Bernie that resonated, that was the truth teller that you wanted to hear from, and you just didn't get that last night.
Jen, I don't want to bring back flashbacks or unpleasant memories. This is an interesting thing people, I think, are trying to figure out. Sanders, who was able to get, I think, 43% nationally of the popular vote in 2016. Now he polls it. I know the field is much larger right now, but I think there were certain expectations about what he carried into this race from the last race. And maybe there's a sense now that that was overestimated, that was overstated. When you look back at what he was able to tap into running against Hillary Clinton, how would you define it? What would you?
I'd say he was like the perfect person to go against Hillary Clinton, right? Which, like, I did not see in the beginning. By the time we got to July of 2015, I understood that this was a pretty toxic matchup for us, because he is anti-establishment. He was everything that she wasn't, from having, on her side, a very effective, someone who'd been effective legislator as well as, State Department leader, and on his side, just somebody who has, like, a very core belief that he's been arguing for 40 years that was very anti-establishment. So I think that he was sort of a perfect foil for in that regard, and he was the only alternative, right? So of course his support is going to fall off in 16 and 20 when there are more alternatives, and I just don't know that in the end Warren may end up besting him. She's been just chugging along.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.